In part one of this video series, I introduced you to multi-layered architecture, which I used as a reference to create a complex Visual Studio project. In this video, I want to show you how to add logging to that complex project. Okay, I'm going to put it in the infrastructure layer. I'm going to show you how to use a NuGet NLog package using the package manager console, and show you how to use two commands: find package and install package. And then once we do that, we're going to configure NLog using configure targets and rules. Okay, and then I'm going to show you how to create two classes: application base and static logger, and then demonstrate each of these classes in an EmployeeVO example. Now, this is just an example. Normally, I wouldn't put logging in a VO, but this is a quick and easy way to do it. I want to pay homage to Bjorn Strustrup. He designed the C++ language, and in his article 16 Ways to Stack a Cat, demonstrated that there's multiple ways of going about doing something. So this is just one particular way. All right, I'm going to start Visual Studio 2015, and once it loads up, I'm going to load up the employee training project, which I created in the previous video, or the first part of this video series, and you can refer back to that to see how I structured the different 4 different sub-projects in this employee training solution. Before I continue, let's take a quick review. So if we right-click on the solution and we look at the properties, something I did not explain in the previous video is what are the purpose of setting these project dependencies on the solution. So let's just take data access layer. The data access layer depends on the infrastructure layer, right? And in order for the data access layer to compile, the infrastructure layer project must compile first successfully before the data access layer, because it depends on the DLL that is generated by this project. So if we look at business object layer, it depends on both the data access layer and the infrastructure layer. So those two projects must compile successfully before the business object layer project can compile, and so on. Okay, I hope that clears that up. I'll just cancel out of here. So to logging, what I want to do is I want to first start by adding my NLog package, okay, my NuGet package, to the infrastructure layer. Now, the way I do this is I'm going to just put the logging package in the infrastructure layer, since all the other layers in this project depend on that. And I'm just going to keep that NLog package isolated to that particular project, the infrastructure layer project. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a class, a couple classes. One's is going to be application base, and one's going to be called static logger. And then if anybody else, if any other piece of code in another one of these layers need to access logging functionality, they can just use either of those classes, either by extending the application base or by just using the static logger from the infrastructure layer. And they don't have to necessarily deal with importing a reference to NLog, or you know, so you don't have to have NLog in all 4 different projects. You just keep NLog, those packages, local to that one particular project, the infrastructure layer project. And that works out fine for me. You know, it's not necessarily the best way to do it. It's not necessarily the only way to do it. It's just a way to do it, and that's the way I like to do it. Okay. Like I said at the beginning of this video, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Okay, so in order to proceed, I'm going to go to Tools in Visual Studio. Again, make sure the infrastructure layer is selected. I want to use NuGet Package Manager, but before we do, we'll take a look at where the Package Manager gets its NuGet packages. So what I did there was I selected Tools, I went to NuGet Package Manager, and then the third menu selection, Package Manager Settings, I opened it, and I want to click Package Resources, or Sources, and we have NuGet.org. So my machine is connected to the internet, and I can connect to NuGet.org, and I can grab these Microsoft Visual Studio offline packages, which is checked. Okay. But if you worked in a situation where your development machines were isolated from the internet, then you would have to burn these NuGet packages that you wanted to import onto a DVD, stick them on a shared drive, and then point your package sources to that shared drive. And you can do that, and then you can install from the shared drive the NuGet packages that you need. So that's a neat little tip. In situations where you're working in an organization where your machines are not connected to the internet. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out of here, and what I need to do is I need to find NLog. So let's go ahead and just do a find package and see what comes back. All right, so now we have a list. Let's scroll back up here. You can see that the packages that are available are listed here. We will use Entity Framework when I get to talking about entity modeling with Visual Studio in a follow-on video. And NLog, okay, so that's the one that we're looking for. So let's go here. Now, if you need to find help for a command, okay, I think you just type help. Let's see what happens here. I might be wrong. Okay, yeah, okay, so help scrolled up there. Okay. So let's see if it gave a list of commands. Let's see. Get help on a particular command. Short description. Okay, let's see here. Scroll down a little bit more. Get help search term. Well, there's a help there. Let's install the package. The command for install package. Let me just clear the screen. It's capital NLog is what we're looking for. So let's go down here. Let's go clear screen. CLS. All right, and then we'll do install package NLog. Okay, so what it does, it gathers up. Now, once again, make sure that your infrastructure layer is installed. Okay. So it says it's successfully installed. Okay, so now what happens is it created. Let's take a look at what's actually been done here. We have. All right, it's not finished yet. All right. Well, I've selected package config, right? So it created this new file called packages.config. Okay, and in it, it says, hey, you've installed the NLog version 4.4.11 package. Fine, we can close that file. Let's take a look at the references. And we have a new NLog reference in our infrastructure layer project. Now, something else that's nice to install is actually you have to configure it. Once we've installed NLog package, we have to configure the package. So let's take a look at another way to install a package. We go back up to Tools, and we'll go NuGet Package Manager, and we'll say Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. And then we come up with it's got NuGets installed. Let's take a search, NLog, and let's look for some more. Searching for NLog. So I searched up here. Oh, I'll browse. You know what? Maybe if I pull my head out of my booty, let's go browse here. Not the ones that are installed. Let's just search for NLog. Okay, that's better. So make sure if you're searching for new packages, don't click on installed. Those are the ones that are installed in your project. Click on browse. Okay, nlog.config. Okay, that's what we're looking for now. So I'm going to say install into the infrastructure layer project. Install. Okay. So now it gives you the NLog schema and the NLog config. Hit OK. Now you see it added these two files over here. We got the NLog config, okay, and the NLog .xsd file. Fine. So we're just going to busy ourselves with this NLog config file here. So what we need to do is, let me see, I'm going to add a target and a rule and a variable. Okay, so NLog, what's it do, right? It's a logger. It's going to enable us to sprinkle through our code statements that allow us to capture valuable information when we're debugging or running the application, which will aid in debugging, okay, and aid in determining the status of the app. All right. So in order to tell NLog where to write things out to, where to write these logs to, you have to configure that in the NLog config file. So I'm going to create, there's a couple different tags here. One, there's a variable. You can put variables in here. Okay. And you can add targets. So there's the opening target tag. There's the closing target tag. Okay, let's collapse targets and rules. Okay, so essentially we busy ourselves with targets and rules. All right, so these are obviously pre-put comments in here with links to where you can find more information. This is not a tutorial on NLog per se. This is a tutorial on how to add NLog into project, right? So the type of target I want to add is I want to write to a file in a directory called logs, lowercase logs, and every day, right, whenever the date turns over, it'll go to a new directory where the logs are going to be written. And that's fairly easy to do. And I want to make it asynchronous. Okay, so that multiple loggers ain't fighting for contention at the same time to write to the same file. All right. So let me just go ahead and add, a new target here. Notice I'm in between these comments. Okay. So let's do target. Okay, so it's going to go ahead and type. So the type of target is going to be, I'm going to say async wrapper. Okay, async wrapper, which is the first one that pops up on the list. All right, hit space, and then the name is async. Now this is where you got to come up with some creativity. ASYNC, async file. Alrighty, so there's my opening tag. Now what I want to do is I want to change this from a, there we go, right, from a slash close tag to just a close angle bracket. That gives me a enclosing target tag. Now I'm going to add another target. Now I'm going to add a target, which is going to be of type file. Okay, so just hit tab, and the name of this file is going to be, okay, log file, just like that. Well, no, I don't need an F, capital F, log file. Okay, the name of this target is log file, right? So not the name of the file, the name of the target is log file. The type is a file. Okay, and the file name, here's the important part, file name. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to actually make my life a little bit easier here. I'm going to hit $, and I'm going to do this. So this is how I use a variable. I have not defined this variable yet. I'll define it in a second, so bear with me. And the way that you reference variables in NLog is var : log. So the name of the variable is log directory, okay? But I have not yet defined that variable. I'm getting ready to do it right now, okay? Okay, so yep, this is fine, right? Let me go ahead and clean this up. Okay, log directory. Now I need to define this variable. So I'm going to go up here to my variable section. Okay, and I'm going to define a new variable. This variable came with it, my var, right? You can just leave that there. Variable. Okay. Next is name. Okay. Is going to equal log directory. So that's where that variable name comes, right? Log directory and log directory. Down here you see log directory, there's log directory. Okay, now we're going to define what log directory is, so value. And now we're going to use another kind of baked in variable, which is not necessarily required nowadays, but it's helpful to figure out like what's going on. Baster. So that's the baster of where the application executes. That's a variable. So this is how you reference a variable. Use $, angle brackets, put the variable name. This baster is you know, kind of baked into NLog. And then I want to put it in whatever the working directory, the base directory of the executing app. I want to put it in a directory called logs / right? And then here's another baked in variable, short date. Short date. Okay, so I didn't define baster or short date. You know, it does that for me. Okay. So that is the path, the base executing directory for wherever my app's running, into a subdirectory called logs, into another subdirectory called short date. And then whenever the date changes, there'll be another directory with logs, right? There's many different ways, right? I'm just using this as a simple example. You can have it where it just goes to the logs and goes to a particular file, right? You don't necessarily have to do it with a short date directory. Like I say, if you want the full scoop on NLog, go check out the NLog docs at nlog.org or wherever they keep that stuff at. Now, okay, so now we need a rule. All right, so let's scroll down here. Let's just check everything. So var log directory, make sure log directory is spelled. And we want to save this periodically so it doesn't get... I'm going to click up here on this tab. We can close that NuGet package thing. So I'm going to scroll down here to the rules now. I need to add a rule. So I'm going to come down here between these comments, and I'm going to add a rule. Okay. So the rule is simply going to say, hey, I want to, at what, you know, what do I want to log, essentially. So rule. All right, so I'm going to say logger name, okay, equals, I'm going to say all loggers, whatever the logger is, okay, is the minimum level that it's going to log to or log at is, I'll say info, okay, that's the minimum level, and write to, so whenever it logs, it's going to write to the async file. Async file is the name of this target. Okay, async file. So check the spelling. So the name of the target's async file. You're not writing directly to the file, right? The async file is going to manage the access to log file. We're going to write to the async file. Okay, and then we just close that with a /close tag, okay, and then we save it. So, how do we test this thing? Okay, well, we need to create a class that uses these log files, right, or uses logging in some particular fashion. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to infrastructure layer, and I'm going to create a value object. I'm going to close this config file. There's no guarantee that it's 100% correct at this point. Now, in my infrastructure layer, I'm going to create a new, I'm going to add a folder. Okay, and I'm going to call it common, because anything in this common file will be common to the, you know, to the project itself, right? To everything in there. So, and then I'm going to add in this common folder, I'm going to add a new item, a class. Okay, and I'm going to call this class, let me see here, class, oh yeah, application base. Application base. And my intention here is to locate the logging code in application base, right? So in application base, what I need to do is I need to add using NLog. Just like that, right? Using NLog, because I'm going to be using the NLog app. Okie dokie. All right, now I'm going to change from just class application base to public class application base. And I'm going to come down here into the body of my class, and I'm going to create a protected property, protected logger. Okay, and I'm going to call this property log. And I'm just going to say get, semicolon, and private set, like that. All right, that's pretty straightforward. Now I'm going to create the constructor. So the constructor will be protected. The only thing that uses this application base will be subclasses, right? So there's no need to make these things public. A derived class will have direct access to these protected methods. Okay, application base, right? It's already trying to tell me, hey, don't type, just go ahead and hit tab. Now, what I want to feed in here is a type, and I'm going to call it declaring type. So that's the parameter name. But what's coming in is I want to know what type. Let me finish the code here real fast, right? So I'm going to say log. I'm going to assign log, the log property equals log manager. Okay. Dot get logger. Right. Declaring type. Dot full name. So what happens is whenever we log something, the logger will say, oh, okay, here's the class or the type that's actually, calling the logger, right? So all your log entries will be tagged. It'll give you a hint on like where things are happening, right? You just don't want to log a message and not give some indication of where this is coming from. This is actually, so this is a string, right? You could feed anything into here for this log, but for this particular example, I'm using a type, and then I'm passing in a type to the application base. So I'll give you an example of how I use this. So I'll create a value object, and this is just for demo. When I create value objects, I usually do not extend. I usually try to keep them lean and mean, right? So value object in and of itself does not need logging, all right? Logging is usually best kept to like business objects and data access objects, but the value object, since I'm in the infrastructure layer, I'm just going to create a new folder. So I'm going to say add new folder, and I'm going to call this VO for my VOs, okay? And then in this VO folder, I'm going to add a new class, all right? And I'm going to call it EmployeeVO, since eventually we will. EmployeeVO, okay? Add. So, now, I'm not going to fully implement the employee value object. What I am going to do is I'm going to create a constructor, but first, before I do that, I'm going to say using, because my application base is over here in the common folder, I'm going to say using infrastructure, right? Layer tab dot common. So it gives me access to that application base, and I'm going to change the declaration of the class to public class EmployeeVO, okay, space colon extends application base. And there it is. Okay. Now we have open brace, closing brace. Okay. Okay. So in order to create this, I need to add a constructor. So public EmployeeVO, right? Now, what I need to do is, every time I create a new employee, well, I'm in the EmployeeVO class, right? So I'm just creating a default constructor at this point. What I want to do is, say here, so base dot, okay. Actually, I could just do it like this. Base. And then I'm going to say, so what we need to do at this point, we need to use some reflection. So system, okay, system dot reflection dot, this is where I always get a little jammed up here. And let's see, method, method, it's method base dot get current method dot declaring type. Oh, that's a method. Okay, that's a method right there. Dot declaring type dot full name. Okay, that's the declaring type. We stop right there. Okay, and that should be it. All right, now, so what's this? Oh, well, let's see. Let's actually let's give it something here. So let's go up in here to application base, and what I want to change is, let me think. Let's see. Okay, so I create the law. Okay, so I'm in my employee. There's no change needed here. Let me just save that application base. EmployeeVO. So I've created my EmployeeVO. All I'm doing, I'm not fully implementing it. I'm just adding a constructor. Okay, it's going to then initialize the application base class with its declaring type. And then down here, since in my application base, I have this protected log property, right? I'm just going to, in the body of this, I'm going to say log dot info, right? And then give it a string. Instance created. Well, let's just do this. Instance created. Now you're going to be saying, well, okay, what good is that? Well, if you're tracing things, right? This is just an example. Notice I didn't put EmployeeVO object instance created, right? Because all that's going to be handled like when the logger does the output. So first off, let's build this thing and make sure I didn't dork anything up. All right, so build solution. Okay, 4 succeeded. Now, one last thing, right? I built it, but I need to add one more thing. So whenever we run this thing, right, we got to have some place to actually create an EmployeeVO instance so we can see this thing run. So we have, let me just run it first, right? Nothing's going to happen. You're not going to see any logging, but you'll see what happens when I run. And I demonstrated this in the previous video. It's just a simple form at this point, right? In my presentation layer, have form 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to form 1 and I'm going to add a line in form 1's constructor underneath initialize component here. I'm going to say using infrastructure. Okay, now notice it doesn't show up, right? So what I have to do is I have to come to my references section. Okay. In my references, I have to, and you'll have to do this for all your different projects, right? When you're ready, add a reference to a project in the solution, and I'm going to add the infrastructure layer. Hit OK. Now it's added my infrastructure layer to the references for my presentation layer project. And now I can go down here and say using infrastructure, right? There it is. Actually, I'm going to use a VO, so infrastructure.VO. I don't need to use common infrastructure VO. So now I'm using infrastructure VO. And now I have access to my EmployeeVO. So I'm going to say EmployeeVO, employee value object. And I'm going to say VO equals new EmployeeVO, just like that. Okay. And that should, okay. So now what we should do is when we run the form, you won't see anything different when the form runs, but we should be able to go to where the working directory for the presentation layer project resides and find a logs. So let's go there now and see what the state is. Okay. Since we haven't logged anything, there should be no folder. So I'm going to save the form and I'm going to minimize Visual Studio. I'm going to go to my C drive. I'm going to go to my projects folder, software, employee training, and I'm going to the employee training folder. This is, so the bin, debug. All right, so that's where employee training is going to execute. Okay, it's in the debug folder of the employee training folder. Okay, that's where the solution is going to execute. So notice there is no logs folder. So I'm going to leave that open. I'm going to go back to Visual Studio and I'm going to start the project. It'll compile. It'll open up the form. Now let's minimize Visual Studio and we have a logs folder. Voila. And there's the file. Okay, so let's take a look at this file. I'm going to use Notepad. Okay. Okay. So that's whenever we created that instance, right? The application base, I mean, I logged in the EmployeeVO. I said log.info. So on this date, it logged at info level, right? And it gave me the type. Hey, an instance of infrastructure VO EmployeeVO was created. So instance created. That's the message I sent. All this other stuff was sent. It was created by NLog. Okay. So there we have it. And I do have to make a correction. You know, it's the short date is the date of the file. Okay. So if we go back to there's not a separate directory for the dates. So in your log folder, your log file will have the short date. Now you could append to that log file name. You could say logs, you know, whatever you wanted to, and append the date, right? And you can have multiple targets. This is the beautiful thing about, you know, setting up your logging. So logging is one of those critical infrastructure things that you want to kind of get squared away before you start coding. Okay, and we can stop this project here. You know, because it helps you when you develop, right? You need the logging capability, and that's why I chose to implement logging first, to make sure I had the infrastructure. You know, as the project proceeds, you can go back to the NLog config, add more targets, add more rules, and modify things as necessary. So now let's try let's add another class to the common. Sometimes you don't want to extend application base. Like, for example, I don't necessarily want application base, you know, I don't want my VOs to extend application base with logging in application base. So I'm going to close all these. All right. And, well, I'm going to add another file. Okay, I'm going to call this static logger. And the purpose of static logger will be so that I can access logging from any class in my project without dealing with NLog, right? And importing the package, etc., etc. So I'm going back up to my common folder. I'm going to add, okay, a class, and I'm going to call it static logger. Static logger. Okie dokie. Now, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say using NLog because I need that. And then I'm going to, for this class static logger, I'm going to say public static class static logger. Okay. And then I'm just going to create a series of methods. I'll start with one, and then I'll add the rest after I've demonstrated it. So I'm going to say the first method is public static void log info. Okay. You're like, what? So then argument is going to be type. Okay. Declaring type. Comma. And string will be the text that we want to send. Open brace, closing brace. And then here I'm going to say log manager dot get logger. Okay. Declaring type full name dot full name. Okay. Space dot, right? And then info, and then send in the text for that info log. Okay. So let's save this, and I'm going to modify. Let's go back to the EmployeeVO. So now in EmployeeVO, I have, for the first version, right, I extended application base and simply accessed the protected property log, which is defined in application base in the body of my VO. But now I'm going to change some things around here. I'm going to get rid of this extends application base. I don't need this piece anymore because I'm not extending anything. And this no longer works. But what does work is this. Static logger dot log info. Now I need a declaring type, so I need to go back to my, right, I should have copied that. I have to remember it again, system, right? Oh, actually, I don't need to do that whole shebangaroo, right? There's a shortcut. I can say this dot get type. It's right there, get type. It's a method, okay? Comma, and just say instance created. Okay, and then semicolon at the end of that statement. So that's a little bit cleaner for the VO, right? That's a little bit cleaner for the VO. I'm not extending the application base anymore. Nothing wrong with doing it, but for VOs, right? VOs are passing stuff around multiple layers, right? In between layers. There's no need for logging for that. Just makes it heavier, I think, right? No need for that. Okay. Now so I don't have to change my presentation layer. That's fine, right? I don't have to change my application base. That class is pretty much where it needs to be for this point. Static logger, it only has one method in it. Let's go back to the static logger. It's got the log warn, okay, log info, I should say, log info. And here, declaring type, right? I pass in the declaring type for the employee type. Well, actually, I'm calling static logger here in the EmployeeVO. So now let's run it. And what we'll see is we already have the log directory and we have that file. But what we'll find is when we go open that file, we'll have another entry. All right, notepad. And there we have it, right? So this is the second entry. All right, and we just created it with a different, class. We used the static logger for the second line, and we used the capabilities of application base for the first line. Okay, now let's go back to static logger, and I'll show you how to put in the rest of those methods, right? So we've got the log info. Oops. Okay, I got to stop this before I can edit, right? So stop the debugger. All right. Now we can just move along here at light speed. Control C and Control V. So log info. I want to do, let's say log warn. Log warn. Change this to dot log warn. There we go. right? So come down here, Control V, log debug. All right, and then log debug. I'm mumbling to myself. I'm not speaking up into the microphone. Okay, you see IntelliSense, right? It's attempting to complete the code. V is for paste, right? So log, I think log trace. I'll do log trace next. Log trace. Log trace. I only got a couple more to go, and this thing will be done. Control V. Log error. You know, so you can integrate NLog into, you know, your Windows event logs, right? I'll do another video on that one of these days. It's log fatal. Oops, fatal. So now let's go back. Let's save that. Let's go back to EmployeeVO and do another log type. So here we did log info. And I'll change the log info to, well, let me see here, to log debug. And I'll put this class has a serious problem. Okay. Okay, so save. Now I'm going to run the project, and we should see a debug level message written to the logs, right? You could separate, you know, if you could have separate info logs, you could have separate debug logs, you could have separate fatal logs, but I'm writing to the same log. Notepad, okay. And, oof, it did not write. Why did that not write? All right. Well, obviously I'm doing something wrong. I have to go back to the drawing board. Give me 1 second. Okay, so here's the issue. The one thing I do want to show you about NLog is there's log levels, okay, and here's the order. So the lowest is trace, okay. Debug is next, right? And I had it set at info. So anything debug and below would not be traced or not be put out to the log file. Okay. So if you set the level to fatal, then only the fatal errors will go. If you set it to error, then error and fatals will be logged. If you set it to warning, then warning, error, and fatal will be logged. If you set it to info, then warning, error, and fatals and info will be logged. So if you set it to trace, everything from trace on up to fatal will be logged, right? So if we slide this back out of the way and we come over here to trace, okay, then, and we put a trace statement in, or we put a, you know, we put an info or a warning, right? Or a debug. Let's say we put a debug in. Then the debug statement will go. All right, so we go back to employee and we can say, oh, okay. We can log debug. So let's run this now, right, and see what happens. So before we do, let's take a look at our file. And we've got our 2 messages in. All right, so we've got 2 info messages in the log file at this point. And let's go back to Visual Studio. And I'm going to run this. And then when this executes, we should have a debug. Okay, so it's running. And come here. I'm going to right click this time and edit with Notepad++. All right, so we have our infrastructure VO debug. That space is because when I went in here and deleted 2 lines from testing, I can save it. All right, this class has a serious problem. There's our debug. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up this video. Logging is important for moving forward with this project anyway, especially when you're working with complex projects and you have a lot of code that you're writing and you want to, you know, sprinkle the logging Now you can log to the console, you can log to files, you can have multiple targets that you want to send to, you can log to database, you can log all over the place. NLog is a fairly powerful tool. And like I said, the video was not to teach you how to use NLog per se, but to how you can set up logging within a complex project in Visual Studio. So as usual, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to contact me, Rick at pulpfreepress.com. I hope you found this video interesting. I'm going to stop this project from running. And with that, I bid you a good day. Take care.